This training will cover how to create an invoice for Al Dahra on the Ariba network. Please note that before being able to create an invoice, you will have to create the order confirmation and the advance ship notice. In some cases, Al Dahra will require a goods receipt. In that case, the business will create the goods receipt, and you will not be able to create the invoice until the goods receipt has been created. It is mandatory to create the order confirmation and the ship notice before creating the invoice. The first thing you'll need to do is go back to your email and find the purchase order for which you want to create the invoice for. You'll need to click on the Process Order button. Once you do that, you'll be taken to the Ariba network, where you'll need to enter in your user ID and password, the same one that you would have used when creating the order confirmation and the ship notice. Once you've entered in your user ID and password, click Login, and you'll be taken directly to the invoice. You'll notice that the invoice is in received status. This means that someone from the business at Al Dahra has created the goods receipt. In some cases, depending on the type of supply or the types of services that have been delivered, the goods receipt is required before you can invoice. If you are able to invoice, you'll see that the Create Invoice button is active. So we will start by creating our standard invoice. Click on Create Invoice, Standard Invoice. Enter in your invoice number, which is your internal number. This could be a number that is generated out of your system where you create your paper invoice. Invoice date is defaulted to today's date. You'll see here the total amounts for the invoice are taken from the purchase order, the subtotal and the tax and the amount due. For taxes, change this icon here to header level tax so that you can enter tax at the header level and you don't have to enter it at the line item level. You'll immediately see the tax came from the purchase order. You'll see here that the tax is at 5%. If you need to add tax or if you don't see this tax section, you simply click on the category and choose VAT. Once you choose VAT, you'll be able to input your tax percentage, which is 5% or 0%. In this example, the tax came from the purchase order at 5%. Again, if you need to change it, you can click on the icon here, the drop down, and choose VAT. Make sure you enter at header level for the taxes. You'll scroll down and you'll enter in the tax invoice number. This number is the same number that you entered up top at the beginning. So I will copy this number and enter it here. It should be the same number. And then the customer VAT is Al Dahra's VAT ID. So you'll need to enter that in manually every time. And this is the current Al Dahra VAT ID. The next thing that's required is for us to add the attachment. You have to add an attachment for your invoice. You can only add one attachment per invoice. Therefore, if you have multiple attachments, then you must create multiple invoice. Again, it's very important to note that you should only add one attachment per invoice. If you have multiple attachments, you need to create multiple invoices. Al Dahra will only accept one attachment per electronic invoice. So we're going to add to header, attachment, and then choose file. I'll choose my file, click open, and then choose add attachment. And you'll see here that the attachment has been added. Now I'll scroll further down and you can see that the purchase order items were taken onto this invoice. If you want to do a partial invoice, you can slide this icon here. It will turn red if you don't want to include certain items onto your invoice and you want to do a partial invoice. In addition, if you don't want to invoice the entire quantity, you can reduce the quantities here in the quantity field. Then I'll click Next. Once I go to the next screen, I know my invoice is ready for submission. I can do one last look to make sure that everything is correct. You'll see here the gross amount, the VAT that was added onto the PO, the remit to information, as well as the bill to information. And as I scroll further down, you'll see here the tax invoice number, your supplier VAT ID. This ID would have already updated it in your Ariba company profile, and it will come through every time you create an invoice. And then finally, you entered in the customer VAT, which is Al Dahra's VAT. These are the 3 line items as well. The last step is to click Submit. And exit invoice creation. If you have a standard account, you will always need to go back to your email to process the order. In case you cannot find your purchase order, you can always go back to your account, log in to supplier.ariba.com. You'll be taken to your home page. You'll be able to see your purchase orders by clicking on any of these options. I'm going to click on the last 200 documents, and you'll see here one of my purchase orders. You will select Send me a copy to take action. This is in case that you cannot find the purchase order in your email. You can always go back to supplier.ariba.com, log in, and then select the icon up here to make sure you're viewing the right documents. I've just chosen the last 200 documents, and then select Send me a copy to take action. Once you do this, a copy of this PO will be sent to your email. You'll open up the email, and again, you'll click on Process Order, and you'll be taken back directly to Ariba Network, where you can further process your purchase order to create your invoice. This concludes the training for how to create an invoice for Al Dahra.